Okay, well, we are live, so I'm going to jump into the chat. Whatever that before. Yeah, lots of things. And we've already got Jay, so we see Jay from Jay's up in Massachusetts, and we've got John in Chicago. So welcome everyone.
Melanie, we're having troubles hearing you still.
Oh, I do not know what is up with this computer. Let me tell you.
Now I can hear you.
Okay, well, I'm just gonna scream into the speaker. I don't know what the heck is wrong.
That's okay. Some days are like that, you know?
Yeah, I've had audio issues. Well, it comes and goes. There's nothing consistent that I can diagnose on this laptop, so I haven't quite figured that out, and can't really do restream on my phone. I think you can. It just makes it a little bit more cumbersome. So we've
Yeah,
got
I finally
we
broke down and bought a Shure microphone that's like a radio quality mic. Um,
I actually do need to do that. That's one thing. Actually, you know what? I do have it from my Udacity courses. I just gotta find it. It's somewhere. I ended up not using it because I ended up going in studio for that particular um, for those courses. I ended up going into the studio in DC, and so I didn't really have a chance. So I didn't have to use the equipment to use it for that. But that's all here there. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and we will just jump right into the conversation.
all righty. I'm Charlotte Taylor. I'm a career coach and resume writer based in Central Florida. Tonight, we're going to be talking about interview strategies, right? I've been working with a client that has gone through serial interviews. In other words, he's interviewed with four different people. Um, each time they call him back, he interviews with a different person, usually two people per day until they get to the final round. And so we've really been strategizing about okay, the first interview was with the HR director. What, let's think about the kinds of questions that they'll be asking you. Next one was VP of Sales and Business Development. So let's talk, that one was easier because that was in his technical wheelhouse. Then he had to meet with a product manager. Um, and so the questions there fell into, how he was going to, implement go to market strategies to, you know, make that product really sell. And then the last one was with the sales team that he would be managing. And so I thought it was an interesting mix of both, you know, executive level and the sales team. But what a great way to be able to get a good grasp on what it was going to be like to work there than to meet those four people. Or I don't know how many people were in the team meeting, but he got to meet them all at once and, kind of sit down and talk about his leadership style.
I love it. And I've also had a client recently go through some very similar process with a very large company up in Minnesota. I just would literally emphasize the word Minnesota. So it's like I'm from there or something. But for those, well, I first saw, I should introduce myself. And so for those that don't know who I am, my name is Melanie Nicole Wexler. I am a former recruiter. I was a recruiter for 20 plus years, then transitioned into career coaching, and now I focus on career coaching senior level to senior, mid to senior level executives, and helping them with everything from their resumes, LinkedIn profiles, optimization, LinkedIn optimization. You can tell I'm a little rusty. Haven't done LinkedIn live in a while. And as well as interview preparation was actually one of my favorite things to do. Truthfully, when I was a recruiter, I had a really special team in my last full-time recruiting position, and we each kind of had strengths. I had an amazing writer who would write up the um, basically mini cover letters to the clients based on the candidates we were presenting. He was just a really great writer, so we always kind of had him do that. And one of my strengths was honestly just preparing candidates for their interview. So anytime we had somebody lined up to do an interview, they usually got prepped by me. I always said I didn't care. We had a really strong retention rate with from landing in positions, and I always treated every interview the same. So it didn't matter if it was a short contract position or a six-figure role, we were going to treat it exactly the same, and it had to have the same sense of urgency, and that it was all important. It didn't matter what the position was, what level the person was, we were going to treat that very much the same. I actually love interview preparation, and truth be told, I honestly could do interview preparation all the time. That's probably one of the things I would actually love to do. I get really excited to see candidates or my clients in particular transform and their confidence grow. And that's kind of, one of the things for me, and I'll stop talking here shortly, but is to be able to, I really feel the key to a good interview is having confidence. What are your thoughts on the confidence factor and the success that comes from that?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I guess so. I'm the other person in the room, right? You're still
I
kind of
mean, that
fading in
cat.
and
I
out.
do. I do have the cat, but he does not seem.
Not seem to
He
count.
he does
I
not seem to be concerned by any of anything I have just said.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. In fact, I wrote a post about a client that I had. Oh, it's been about 10 years ago now. But, everything I suggested, it was that won't work. Or everything I suggested was, I can't do that, and we had to get underneath what that underlying cause was. And it was confidence, pure and simple. She just didn't have the self confidence to believe that she could do that. So, I think part of a coach's responsibility is to kind of, dig a little deeper, find out what's going on, why has her self-confidence lagged? What particular interview questions was she dreading answering? And then it's just such a joy to see people just take off and soar and call me back all excited. I had a really great interview, and I think that's, why I do what I do. Um, and I think, Melanie, you probably feel the same way. There's nothing better than seeing your clients succeed and really um, grow in that confidence level and be able to put themselves out there, not be reserved or reluctant about it.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I think, to me, one of the things we don't talk about enough is, obviously, and we're going to get into some common interview questions that you're going to be faced with. But that being said, if you can go into an interview with a lot of confidence, that's going to be a game changer for you. Because oftentimes, especially the world that we're living in today, in today's market, it's coming down to nuances in these interviews. And people are, getting sometimes feedback. We went with somebody with just a little bit more experience. And really, the truth is, that is what's happening. And so, a lot of it is that personality factor. Do we see ourselves working with this person? Can we work with this person? And so sometimes it's less about the technical aspect and more about the personality and a personality fit in a company culture fit too.
Yeah, I agree, especially about the culture fit and leadership philosophy. I think is they're really digging deeper for that. What kind of leader are you going to be? Are you going to be dictatorial and be the new sheriff in town who tries to change everything, or are you going to be collaborative? And be a good fit in the senior leadership team. Are you going to be a compassionate leader who is really someone that you love, your team loves to work for. Those were all the things that they were evaluating about the client that I told you about. And conflict resolution skills, I think, too, how you handle difficult employee situations, your approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and building a sales team. In this example, and also, your experience, with performance management. How did you handle, difficult team conflicts or whatever? And evidence of ethical decision making. I think those were some things that stuck out to me when my client interviewed with the HR director.
And I just had a client interview who's in the tech space. He's in engineering, and he actually got the opportunity through a referral. He actually hired me to do his resume, and we started to do his resume. And he was like, "Oh my gosh, Melanie, this interview just came in. It's a referral through somebody that I used to work for." And they've literally have fast tracked him. So today he actually had a panel interview, very similar to your situation, Charlotte. He met with people that would be on his team that he would be reporting to, and would also was meeting with basically peer level individuals plus the person that he would report to. I did get news. I don't know the details quite yet, but I did get news that he is going to the third round, which is meeting with his boss's boss. He did say that one of some of the questions were difficult. They were tough, is what he actually said. So here's a not really a common interview question, but a panel interview. We do see those a lot. What's your advice in terms of how to handle that? Because that takes a lot of me.
Yeah, that can be really intimidating, I think, because you feel like you're up against a firing squad, but you have to kind of take into consideration that they really want you to succeed. But one of the key things that you can do in a panel interview is to really make eye contact. If the human resources director asks you a question, you give them an answer that relates to a human resources function most of the time. If the technical manager asks you a question, they're looking for a different type of answer. So if you can get the names of the people on the panel before you have the interview, kind of look them up on LinkedIn, see if you can figure out what their communication style is. I like to use a program called Crystal Knows, CrystalKnows. Basically, it does a little mini Myers-Briggs assessment of your communication style, so you know whether to be conversational and witty with a person or whether they're just want the facts and just the facts. So having some knowledge about that person's personality is helpful. If you don't have that, just try to think of, okay, in this role, they would want to know this about me, and try to give them an answer that's related to their needs. And look them in the eye when you're speaking to that person. Don't try to look at the whole panel at once. Um, and just speak up, because in a room like that, sometimes the acoustics aren't as good, unless they take you to a wonderful, meeting room. But if, don't feel intimidated by a panel of people. I like panel interviews when you sit around a big conference table and you're not just one person on one side of the table with 4 or 5 people, opposite you. It just feels more like a conversation than a interrogation, so, but those can be a little hard, don't you think?
Those can definitely be hard, and I was actually looking at some of the feedback my clients gave, and I'm not going to give any names, but I can say that one of the questions that he was actually asked in the interview, and I'll share that because I think it's important to understand there's a purpose for every single question you get asked, for the most part. Now, you're going to maybe get that person that's like, what kind of tree are you? Or, like, Andrew Seaman, just the LinkedIn jobs editor, had a shared something. Somebody was sharing like, what color? If you could invite any two people to dinner, what color tablecloth would you have? So, and he was using that as an example of like random questions and how do you pivot and get it back on track to the topic at hand, basically. So, but most people would on it. And the other thing is that's kind of a trick. I mean, this is not a common interview question, but that's also a trick question because as soon as you start to say that, your thought is, who are the two people you're going to invite to dinner, right? And not necessarily what paying attention to what the question itself is. So I think it's important to always kind of understand that to that point, one of the questions my client Jeff asked was if he was applying for director level jobs or if he was in the final stages of interviewing or closing on any other opportunities. Now, he wasn't quite sure where those questions were coming from, but I can tell you the recruiter in me really loves that question. And I can tell you the reason why I love that question is because they're showing interest. And in this particular case, this is a backfill of a position for somebody that didn't work out. So we know they're already sensitive to somebody leaving and they've invested in somebody that didn't work out that's already left the position. So you get a question like that. Um, and Charlotte, I'd love to know how you would coach somebody and how to respond to that. But if you do get a question that's phrased in that manner of like if they're digging for that type of information, that's an immediate buy-in that they are really interested.
Yeah, I think you can take that as they want to assess if you're a flight risk. And I see this more in younger candidates that are only staying in a job a year, year and a half, and then they're moving on. That's beginning to catch up with people. And it's expensive for a company to invest that much money in a new hire, train them all up, and then they leave in 9 months. So I think flight risk is probably in the back of their mind, or salary. Are we going to be able to afford this person, or do they already have a better offer someplace else? Um, and as far as the tree, I'm a bamboo tree, baby. I'm flexible.
I never really know what kind of tree I would be, but I always tell people never be an oak tree because those are firm, solid, planted in the ground, they ain't going nowhere. So they are not flexible, but also don't be a weeping willow either. Because no one wants to
Yeah,
work with a weeping
yeah.
willow.
No, you can be an apple tree and bring things to fruition if you're a project manager. I mean, try to tie the tree to your job title. Um,
Absolutely. And, you
yeah,
know,
but they
the,
are weird questions. And the one like, how many golf balls does it take to fill up an Olympic-sized pool? You know, things like that.
you know,
You
it's,
know,
like what kind of animal. Don't be a sloth. I mean, I love sloths. I mean, don't get me wrong, but never be a sloth, okay? Just, you always need to tie it. Every question, here's what I will say, even though that our topic was common interview questions, but even though these may not be common interview questions, every interview question you get, use it as an opportunity to highlight your skill, showcase what you bring to the table, bring it back to the job description, show how you relate to the job description. You basically want to connect the dots for the interviewer. So Jay is also, by the way, he's panda all the way. And again, I love a good panda. I could watch panda videos all day when I'm very stressed. But so, um, if you need a stress reducer, watch a good panda video. I'm telling you right away. So, um, and that will do it for you every single, or a good sloth video too. Those will also do it. So, but Jay does have a question for us, Charlotte. Tomorrow he
yeah,
has
I
an
just saw that.
interview for a customer support specialist position. Originally was told was on Microsoft Teams with the hiring manager and two other reps. Responded as which days work best. Then yesterday he was told it would be a phone interview, so he decided to ask for clarification, make sure it'll be on Teams or over the phone. Did receive the email from the customer support saying they're receiving a phone call. Um, oh, okay. So, I'm not sure what your question is, Jay, but good if you want to clarify if you have a specific question. It sounds like you got clarification on what the process is, and again, sometimes it if others are not available, that you will see some changes happen in the interview process. So being flexible is always going to be advantageous for you.
Yeah, and I would say, Jay, they're going to be looking for technical skills, your troubleshooting ability, maybe how you manage frustrated customers and how to diffuse that and help them with their needs. They're going to be looking for really good communication skills. Give examples of how you actively listen to that customer to understand what the problem is, and then create a solution, um, and goodwill, to where that customer feels like their issue was resolved and that you really care about them. um, I think they're going to be looking for emotional intelligence, maybe, the ability to show empathy, to de-escalate, an angry customer, and problem solving. You're presented with this problem, you've got to really think through it and be resourceful and, you know, follow through to see if, you can resolve that problem, or if you need to escalate it, uh, to your manager. Um, so they're going to be looking for collaboration, adaptability, continuous learning mindset. And you have all of those things. So I think you'll be great in your interview tomorrow.
And you brought up some good points, Charlotte, that I would also expand upon for everybody, especially during the interview process. Is sometimes what you do before the interview can set the tone for your interview. So and obviously, yes, we all have schedules, and I know Jay works, and he has he works. I think Jay's working full time, or at least part time at in his other job, and so obviously you have a schedule, and we're not here to bend, to every request, but flexibility does go a long way in the interview process. And also how you respond to things, like Charlotte said, is also indicative of, oh well, if he was really cool about it. He went with the changes, very easily, um, and things of that nature that can reflect positively on you. So his question really was: common? Is it common for there to be communication issues between hiring managers and the applicant? And I would say, I don't know if I would say it's super common, but I would say it's not necessarily out of the realm of possibility that somebody that, oh my gosh, this person has to change the schedule, or maybe the other people that were supposed to be on the call had another meeting that they have to attend to, things of that nature. So I think that, again, your flexibility and how you respond to it, your promptness in responses. I can tell you this: no recruiter likes to have to change the schedule, to be honest with you. But that being said, where I was working in an agency setting, so I worked with both clients as well as candidates. I've had situations where clients have come and said, "Hey, I cannot get out of this meeting. They just put it on my calendar. I cannot do this interview tomorrow. So we need to change." And that's, after getting like, three or four people's schedules orientated, and, working that out. So,
Yeah, and I have one more tip for Jay. Um, and I learned this in a parenting class, but it's equally, I've heard it used in customer service issues too. You're probably going to get that question: how do you handle an angry customer? And it, there's this method called the LEAP method, LEAP. L stands for listen. I start by letting the customer fully express their frustration without interrupting them. The second is empathize. I acknowledge the customer's feelings and validate their experience. The third is apologize. I take ownership on behalf of the company, even if it wasn't our mistake. You can always say, I'm sorry you experienced that. And then you problem solve. I focus on what we can do right now, how to resolve their issue. And you could give an example like, last month a customer was furious about a billing error that had been ongoing for 3 months. And I listened to their full story, acknowledged how frustrating, repeat contacts must be. I apologized for our failure to resolve it because this was the third time she had called, and I immediately escalated the, you know, this to billing while staying on the line. And then we resolved it in 15 minutes, and they actually thanked me for finally taking ownership. So, using that LEAP method, listen, empathize, apologize, and problem solve, it works great. It works for customers, it works for teenagers, it works for to diffuse anybody who is angry. So that's my big tip.
That's a great tip, Charlotte. And yeah, and here's the other thing too. It's schedule changes happen. I mean, they happen. I mean, we've all been in a situation where we've had to change the schedule, and we've all had to do things. So I think it is. I'm really big on bringing in a positive mindset when you enter into an interview. And again, I've been on that side where I've had to change things up, and how you respond and how you treat the situation, whether it's with an you know, hey, I'm here, I'm open to that, I'm willing to be flexible. I think again, it does go a very long way with the recruiting and the recruiting team because it's a reflection on how you will respond to what Charlotte also said in situations with angry customers or tough situations. One of the questions that I did with this client that's giving me live feedback, he doesn't know he's giving me live feedback, but live feedback was, how do you handle tough conversations with other employees? And Charlotte, I'll share my advice on that. What I, what how I kind of walk through a client um, scenario. We also tackled the what is your weakness question as well. So those are two questions that you very well likely will face, and no matter the level of position or role, but it may just be the different type of audience. Charlotte, how would you respond or coach somebody in responding to the tough conversation question?
I would use the problem, solution, outcome, and connection format. And really, you just, my teammate came to me with this problem. We discussed how it was affecting, her productivity at work. Um, we realized there was breakdown in business processes that really were causing, her to work longer hours than she needed to be, so I, you know, developed a solution, got approval from my supervisor. We implemented some new processes, and, you know, uh, now, we get things done faster and the employee is happier. So you always want to put a positive spin on it. It's a trap question. They're trying to trick you into saying, oh, I just can't work with people who, complain all the time. Or, they're trying to get that kind of response out of you to see if you really have some bias, I think. What's your take on it, Melanie?
Yeah, I think that I agree. You have to be very mindful of your answer in that. So, one of the things that I do when I'm coaching is I actually just tell my clients, what is your first gut response to that? And then we kind of work backwards. And, my client in this case, he was like, Melanie, I don't like those conversations. I honestly, my gut wants to avoid them. It was like, well, the reality though is we can't avoid them, right? Because if we are in positions of leadership or management or senior level, or sometimes we're the ones receiving the tough conversation and the tough news, right? I've been on that receiving end of those. We have to be able to handle this. And so one of the things that I also said in the very beginning with coaching this particular client, even literally yesterday evening, was I said, start off with the one thing that we all kind of agree on, nobody likes having tough conversations. And we, from, the, for this particular client, we talked about his leadership style and how, one of the goals is to, that tough conversations are never personally, they're not on the personal attack. Trying to make things very black and white in the sense of, that it's not this is not about, personal, personal issues. This is about an issue that we have with the work, and keep it very work centered and oriented, and that we are here to really, honestly work towards a goal. And so again, being very, this is also being very cultural driven. Question: are you a cultural fit for the team? That's also where this question comes from as well. So it's a matter of like, okay, does your person, and this is, and here's what I would say. This is the one question that could kind of get you out of the running based on the personality of the team and the expectations. And there's, and how you respond, I do believe you need to respond authentically. But remember this too: if you're not a good personality fit for that team and that company, then the job wasn't the right fit for you. And that's not a bad thing. And I really do want to emphasize that. I know that a lot of people are struggling or struggle in the interview process. But the worst thing you can do is take a job that you're not a fit for. That's actually going to set your job search back. Because I've been there, I've seen it too, personally as well as with my clients. But taking a job that's not the right fit will set your job search back 6 to 9 months. Just because you lay off the pedal, you start focusing obviously on the job. You aren't you're not actively looking. So remember that sometimes not getting that offer, there might be other reasons why it wasn't the right fit. So that again, I think is important to understand the importance of this question. And let's see, we're at 6:36. So if you guys have any other questions, please drop them in the chat. Keeping an eye on the chat, and we'll be more than happy to answer that as it relates to interviewing. And or other, if you have other questions from a career coaching standpoint, this is your chance to ask two career coaches. The ladies are holding down the fort this week, and so we're here to support you. And this is your chance to ask us questions and let us know, and give us your thoughts and feedback as well. And one question we know, and here's the thing: I do not like this question. I don't like how it's phrased. I think there could be a different way of phrasing it, but that's a whole other battle to work on. But it is the weakness question, Charlotte. How do
Yeah,
you handle? How do you respond to what is your weakness?
chocolate. Have a one word answer. Bavarian chocolate, preferably. No, in all seriousness, they want to see that you're self actualized. They want to see that you understand your own faults and that you can take criticism. So you want to pick something that you've received feedback on it in the past. It's a real weakness that you've worked on to get better. Nothing that would be a deal breaker from hiring you, but the story is about your quest for improving yourself. So you want to avoid making a positive sound like a negative. Oh, I'm just a perfectionist. Well, they're going to say baloney on that. Or saying something that's a deal breaker, like, I'm just totally bad with people, and you're interviewing for a customer success role. That won't work. So, I like to coach my clients to take a Clifton Strengths assessment. And then, it's a scientific assessment. It shows you your strengths and your weaknesses. And then they could answer something like, I took a Clifton Strengths assessment, and my top strength is achiever, which drives me to get things done efficiently. However, this can sometimes make me impatient with longer strategic planning processes or detailed committee discussions. And I realized this was an issue when I pushed my team too quickly through a product launch planning session, and we missed some critical risk factors that cause problems later. So now I consciously slow down during the planning phases, and I ask myself, what am I missing by moving too fast? And I partner with teams who have deliberative or analytical strengths to help balance my tendency to be, a driver and to execute quickly. That shows that, they understand their weakness. Being, if they're interviewing for director role where they're supposed to, you know, be driving those processes and operational efficiency, that's a good strength to have for that type of role. But any strength can be a weakness in the right situation. So it's like two sides of a coin. You've got to understand how you could use that strength, but you can also understand how that strength can sometimes be a weakness. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. And I want to really emphasize to you, you have to be very mindful with this question. If it is a core responsibility to the role, you do want to be mindful in terms of how you respond to it. So you might need to come up with, like, don't just have, I would tell you this, don't have a canned response of like, oh, my weakness is, procrastination. Um, and for me, I personally like I always put myself under like tight deadlines. I just do it. It's kind of in my nature, and try to keep it a very tight schedule. But that's not a great response to any job that you're going to be applying for. So have in that like, oh, perfectionism, and I really try to have everything right and perfect. Well, that's
Yeah.
never going to happen because we don't live in a
No.
perfect world.
Yeah.
And
And
it also starts to show you're not flexible. That can lead to questions of like, well, are you like flexible when issues arise? How do you handle those issues? I will tell
yeah.
you this, if you respond in a way that creates more questions in the interviewer's mind, you're going down what I call a rabbit hole and you've lost them because we are now not checking boxes, we're unchecking boxes of how you're a fit for the role. Because now we have
Yeah.
more questions than we do answers.
And make that one of your shorter answers. For me, empathy is one of my top strengths. I think that's what helps me to be a career coach, but sometimes I absorb other people's stress and emotions too deeply and lose sleep over somebody else's job search problem.
Yes,
And so, I had to really develop, you know, ways to diffuse that anxiety and frustration of my clients that were struggling, and so I, had to develop better emotional boundaries, and schedule some decompression time after difficult, um, client meetings, um, to, kind of recharge. Um, you've got to be careful about sharing too much, but you also have to say, now I channel my empathy into constructive coaching rather than just feeling what others feel. I think you have to be somewhat of an empath to understand, your client's problems, but you also have to, have those boundaries. This is one of those questions where the less you say, the better, really. Try to not go over a minute and a half, and then deflect from you by asking a question about the role. So when it's a difficult question, you give a really short answer and then you ask a question to make it more conversational. But what that does, it redirects the conversation from your weakness to what in the world does that have to do with this job? Although you can't say that, but by asking that question, you're making it more of a conversation. Does that make sense?
that makes perfect sense. And I'm going to come up to Mary Jo's question next, but Sandra had a point. Like the weakness question is crazy. Definitely could rephrase it. One way you may see this rephrase is what is one area that you can improve upon in you know, your work life, professional life, something along those lines. An area of improvement is a hidden weakness question. So, um, and again, you do need to be mindful of that question because if it is directly related to a core responsibility within the job, you need to make sure that your answer is just, to Charlotte's point, succinct, to the point, keep it very direct, and you also have a workaround solution. So again, weaknesses um, is about being recognizing that you are self-aware and you know what areas that you continuously need to work on and improve. Reality is, all of us have those areas. So, we are all works in progress, but also don't give a vague answer to that question. Like I just responded, like, "Well, we're all works in progress," and we all because then I'm like, "Okay, so you don't really have an answer for me." So hopefully those are some tips that are going to help. But Mary Jo has a networking question for us, Charlotte. So she has a very low comfort level with trying to network, which we come across quite often. She has a lot of old acquaintances in her profession. She doesn't think it's realistic for her to have ongoing contact with all of those people, but wants to start reaching out, asking to do lunch, coffee, asking a few questions. Um, she also is gave us some additional areas that she may be wanting to focus on. But let's start with the first part of it. If somebody is a low level or is a little nervous about networking, maybe reaching out to some folks maybe we haven't talked to in a while, what are some tips that we can give to help with that?
Yeah, I always work with my clients to teach them that there's about 4 levels of networking. You've got the people that are your cheerleaders. You want to start with them first. Chances are, and they're not going to have a job for you, but it helps you get your confidence up. And then the next level of people, they're the people that you want to ask their advice. You want to get some information from them. And sometimes you'll even get a referral for them. And then there's a level of networking that is the person that is really key in this process, somebody who can be your advocate, somebody who can refer you into a company. And then there's the person, with the capacity to hire you. And the reason I say that is, if you're not confident, start with a level of comfort with people that you already know. And, even practice with friends so that you build your confidence up. But, when you're, you know, talking about, just I think it's a confidence issue of just, you got to put yourself out there. What if they don't accept, you can what if yourself to death. What if they don't accept the meeting? What if I say something wrong? What if? You just got to get past that and know that. Yeah, I think in my post today, I said something like networking is kind of like learning to play the piano. You don't want to give up after one lesson. It takes practice to become a good networker. And if you're an introvert, LinkedIn is the perfect place because you don't have to necessarily pick up the phone and call someone first. You can comment on their posts, you can send them a little note. Gosh, I can't believe it's been 15 years since we graduated from ABC University. You know, I noticed that you're now working in a customer support role. And, how's it going with you? That's all you have to do. Open the conversation, be interested in them. You will advance your networking so much faster by being genuinely interested in other people rather than focusing on, you know, what it is you're going to say. People love to share what's going on in their lives. If it's not a person that you can ask them, I noticed that you moved from um, marketing to a technology role, but your degree is in music. That's a really, you know, tell me your story. I'm fascinated, So being interested in the other people is really, I think, the basis of networking.
And I love everything Charlotte just said because it's so spot on. Um, and I'm going to tie this into interviewing. Unless people are not, well, really not professional networkers. I mean, I guess there maybe are some people there, but networking is a skill. Interviewing is a skill, and the only way we get better at skills is we do have to practice. So don't let all the negative, because there's going to be people out there that are going to go, well, I've tried networking and nobody ever responded, or nobody, it's a waste of time, and I don't know how to, there's always going to be that. So keep focused. I always say in the networking piece, you do want support in your job search, but in the networking piece, sometimes being in a silo of like, okay, well, what are the things that I can control in this process? First off, there may be some people that are in that inner circle, which is kind of what Charla was. I view it very much the same. I kind of look at it as bullseye. The inner circle is just people that already know you. They already like, know, and trust you. They already have that comfortability. So they're automatically your cheerleaders. So start with them and build that up. And another great way too is if you see something on LinkedIn, an article, or that's related to the industry that you're in, or a networking event, like an event, even like we'll just use us as an example, or something along those lines that you're talking to, say, some former colleagues or things like that, and go, hey, I just wanted, I know we haven't talked in a long time, but I'm reaching out to, my connections. And I think, Mary Jo, you have a great point in your second comment that a lot has changed since the pandemic. So, find out what's happening in their world. Lead with what Charlotte said. Lead with them first. Not Obviously, we all have goals and that we're trying to reach when we're having a networking conversation. And I always say, what is your goal with having when I'm working with networking with my clients? I always say, okay, what is the goal for this having the conversation with this person? What are we hoping to develop? Why are we talking to this person? Because sometimes it may not make sense to have that conversation. So to your point earlier, Mary Jo, we don't necessarily have to have conversations with everybody that we work with, but let it make sense. I also tell people all the time. I had one client that was very disappointed in her former staff and her former colleagues. She's like, Nani, nobody's reached out to me. And I said to her, I said, but have you reached out to them? And she was like, well, no. And I said, well, maybe they don't realize that you are still looking for a job because you haven't, and you don't have to share that on LinkedIn if you're not comfortable with that. But don't make the assumption that, people know what's happening in your world or what you're looking for. I would also add to any networking question, whether even that center bullseye, that you may say, you know, Aunt, you know, Aunt Sally and Uncle Stan, they don't even understand what I do for a living. But sometimes it's more important about who they know or who they're connected to. And also, folks, there is a world out, I know the LinkedIn girl is saying this, but there is a world outside of LinkedIn in the workforce, okay? So sometimes it's not about them personally, it's more about who they know and who they're connected with. And I will tell you this, every single person on this call, we don't dig enough in terms of the connections that can make introductions for people. Those second who I'm connected with, I always tell my clients, it's not so much you and I connect. Yes, I love connecting with my clients and having them in my, in my feed and being, a connection on LinkedIn and, comments and whatever. But it's more important that they're connected to me because now they're connected to all of my connections. So even on a base level, you can show up on LinkedIn higher in those searches based on those connections. And that can prove valuable as well for you. So sometimes it's not even about the conversation, it is about, who they know. So the point being, never underestimate the power of that second degree connection or who that person is connected to. Well, Charla, we made it to 6:52. Um, we did
Great
it.
minds think alike.
We stayed focused. So I hope, Mary Jo, that was helpful for you, and I hope that we were able to answer some questions for everybody and give you some tips on how to navigate interviews. Charlotte, as we kind of wrap up for the evening, let everybody know where they can find you and anything that you would like to share or what's going on in your world right now.
Yeah, I've started a new service teaching how to use AI in your job search for company research, for industry research, for, those kinds of things that will help you to do better in interview. And it's a 2-hour session where we just walk through your unique situation. And I teach you the prompts that I use to gather information quickly, and, help you apply it. So that's a new service offering that I have. Um, I'd love to connect on LinkedIn. You can usually find me there unless I'm deep into writing projects for clients. But I always check my LinkedIn several times a day if I don't leave it on all day long. Or you can look at my website at writtenbyapro.com. I'll be posting a new downloadable career worksheet that is an expansion of the one that I have up there, that really helps you to understand what your competitive advantage is and how you can differentiate yourself from other people with similar qualifications. It's not up there yet, but if you'd like it, just DM me the word uh, strategy, and I'll send you that PDF, because I don't have it loaded up on the website. Is just a one pager, but I've expanded it to like 12 pages to really, because I'm finding that people are just, they're having a hard time. They're blending in. They're feel like they're invisible, but it's because they're kind of bland in what they're saying about themselves. They're too generic. So this is a process to help you really, understand what is that career superpower that you have that nobody else, has, and how can I connect that in an interview with the employer's needs. So if you're interested in that, just DM me on, that you were on Career Coaches on Call, and you would like that 12-page PDF, and I'll send it to you.
Career different. I'm calling it your career
I
differentiator.
call it, yeah, a career advantage audit
Yeah.
is what I came up with. Yeah.
Okay, I love that. No, I love that, and that's something I maybe that's what we talk about in 2 weeks. Because I agree that was actually something I covered with another client last week. Is we're in a market today that you have that where interviews are coming down to nuances. It is not as um, there's a lot. The people that are being interviewed for roles are highly qualified, just as you are, and it is coming down to small points. And part of that is what you bring to the table and making sure that you are sharing that and that you are owning that. That is the thing that you are, not that you're not good at other things, but what is that transformational piece that you can bring to the table that somebody else isn't, that can actually make a positive impact. You've got to be able to show that. You can't just say, hey, I do X, Y, and Z. You got to understand how it impacts the job and why it's important. You've got to be able to tie it back to the job description. So maybe that's a topic we'll cover in 2 weeks. So, of course, you guys can follow me on LinkedIn. I am doing a lot with our LinkedIn Rockstar Academy with my partner, Shell. We do have a workshop coming up on September 25th. And I'm horrible with dates this month, but September 25th. And I also am rolling out new services too. I've still got to make some minor changes to my website, but my website has my new packages and services that I am offering. And I'm also doing one of the things that I've added to the table is just doing basically a do it yourself resume. I will give you the feedback, and I will do a quick 30-minute session with you where I provide you extensive feedback and I give that to you. You're responsible for updating and implementing that as a tool just to help you up level your resume. And yes, Meryl, at 6:52, Mr. Simpson was staring at me with disdain on his eyes because he was like, "Are you wrapping it up for the day, Mom?" He did make some peeps here, so he is telling Mom that it's time to wrap it up. So the coworker knows when it's 7 o'clock. It is time to quit for the day. So appreciate everybody. Appreciate all the ongoing conversations and feedback. It is greatly appreciated. And we will be back in 2 weeks or in a week and a half. 2 weeks, I don't know. um, something like
And
that.
thanks to
So
Meryl for all you do, for all the thought leadership
yes,
branding rooms. We couldn't do it without you. He's so great to talk about having the gift of connectedness. He's just really a person that if you don't know Meryl, you need to get to know him because he has so many connections and all across everywhere. It just amazes me.
he does, and he knows what's happening, where it's happening, who's it's happening with, and can get you connected. So that is his superpower, absolutely 100%. And well, Meryl knows when I'm doing LinkedIn Lives that I am not a great multitasker with hosting and talking at the same time. So he definitely helps me keep that conversation going and make sure too that I also see questions and that I know what's happening. So
And
any
Linda Brubaker, thank you too. You
yes.
always keep the chat going. And she had a
Oh,
great tip
hello.
too for always send a thank you note. Even if you don't get the job, send a thank you note.
And I'm Linda, I'm goofy as can be. I'm joining Linda. What am I doing? That's a good question. I'm joining Linda tomorrow. She has a lunch and learn session that she hosts, and through her own coaching practice, it is a Zoom. There is an event, so you can go under either one of our LinkedIn profiles under our events and find it. I am doing LinkedIn profile review, so that is tomorrow at 12 o'clock Eastern, 11 o'clock Central. You have to register via Zoom so that we have that. And yeah, so that is also what I'm doing. I do promise, Linda, I actually wrote that down on my calendar prior to this call. So thank you so much. As soon as Charlotte said your name, I was like, wait a minute, I'm with Linda tomorrow for an hour. So, and I do know that. I actually do know that. But yeah, it's super excited to be able to come to that. And we're going to do LinkedIn profile, offering LinkedIn profile advice and reviews.
Yeah, it was a fun session. So
Looking forward to it. We'll be back in 2 weeks.